All right, let's dig into it. So, hey everyone, my name's Luke. I haven't done a stream or any videos in quite a while just because I've been caught up with work and other life stuff, and I just really wanted to get back into it. And I've been thinking about building a series on creating config-driven Vue.js apps because that's basically what I've been doing for the past probably 6 months now. And I think it's really, really awesome. It's a really cool, interesting concept. And I think I've got some really cool tools that we can use to very quickly get up and running to explore some of these concepts. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm just going to build these things from scratch, and I'm going to take notes along the way because eventually I want to turn this into a course. And I don't know what to call it yet, something along the lines of Vue config-driven meta apps. It's hard to choose between the words config-driven and meta because config-driven is a bit more descriptive, but meta is a bit more sexy, I think. But I don't want to get people to get confused with things like meta frameworks, like Nuxt or whatever. So anyway, let's dive right in. I'm going to say create quasar. I'll be using quasar for this. And I use quasar simply because it's what I'm used to, and it's going to give us lots of opportunities to very easily get up and running with some stuff. So app with quasar CLI, and let's just call this maybe config-driven Vue. I'll be using TypeScript. Let's use Vite. And config-driven Vue is fine for that. Config-driven Vue. I always feel like I'm typing in the same thing for a lot of this stuff, especially when I'm starting out a project. Okay, let's use composition API with script setup, of course. Yeah, Sass is fine. And we are going to end up needing Pina. And I won't use Axios. I use something called Wretch for my backend requests. And linting, yes, we'll use ESLint. And we're going to use Prettier. Use PNPM. I never liked using Prettier. And recently, I think I'm slowly changing my mind. So maybe eventually I'll end up moving over to Prettier more permanently. But the fact that it runs really, really quickly is awesome. There we go. Config. I just had a lot of trouble getting it to set up the way I liked it, but it seems to be a bit better these days. So I'm going to open that in VS Code. Should be able to close out of this now. And I'm hoping that this is going to be big enough for you to see. Let me just take a look at some of my settings. So if I jump in here and look at the zoom level, yeah, level 5 should be good enough. What I'm doing is I got a really big monitor here. It's a 4K monitor. It's like 42 inch. And I figured, because my eyesight's not brilliant, I would just make everything really big and then kind of dial it down in my stream. So that's kind of what I'm trying. And it looks like on my bottom screen here, it does look like it's quite legible. So let me know if you find it to not be legible. I think I already installed dependencies. P, by the way, is PNPM. That's what I've assigned that to. So we might just say quasar dev to get up and running. Ooh. Really? We're getting errors from the get-go here. Maybe I'll just run pdev rather than doing it through the CLI. I think that's what you're supposed to do these days anyway. All right, that's weird. So I might just nuke my node modules folder because there might be maybe even my PNPM lock. There's some weirdness going on. And I'm also going to delete my .quasar folder in case there's some weird caching stuff that's going on in there. All right, cross my fingers. Otherwise, this is going to be a very short stream. Man, this has never happened to me with Quasar, which makes... Oh, this whole crypto hash thing. Okay, it's because of my default node version. I'm using the wrong node version. So what I usually do now is I have a .node version. Is that what it is? I can't remember the name of this file. I don't think it is node version. .node version file, something like that. You probably won't be able to see what I'm writing up here very well, but I figured that's a okay trade-off for being... for the way I've got this set up. And am I zoomed in? Yeah, maybe a bit better. No, node dash version. That would be my problem. Node dash version. Look at that. Didn't even use AI to figure that one out. Let's go 24.0. I think that's how you do it. Or even like 24 on its own. Let's cd out of here and cd back into that directory. Yeah, and it's automatically switched me to that version of Node. So that'll do for now. You can be more specific. In fact, I might do that. Let's just do this. So it's got a more specific version of Node. Okay. Well, how's that for a start? pdev, which is basically the same as running pnpm dev. And there's our project ready to go. And I'm just going to do some of that basic stuff you usually do, like, updates to Vue DevTools. All right, definitely got to watch that later. All right, so we want to jump into our index page and basically get rid of everything. This is where we're going to start playing around. And I don't need any of the stuff we get by default. And I'm going to set up a few defaults that I usually set up here. So I might actually whack that on the left side. So where's my prettier file? I like to have single attribute per line. So that basically just means that when you got multiple attributes like this and you save it, then each attribute gets its own line. I like doing it that way. You can do it however you like. I've also got some essential rules that I usually have with ESLint. So let's go to our rules section in here. Where is it? It's probably a faster way to find this. And I remember there's two. Yeah, and it says add your custom rules here. So we'll throw them in there. Okay, that's already off. I think maybe I've added that just to show myself the context. So I always add this in, view block order, telling me to have the script tag first. This is a really cool rule that basically means that, well, exactly what I just said. So you'll notice that we've got a yellow squiggly there, and if I save it, now the script tag goes at the top. When I code, I have very, very little code sitting inside of my script tag, and usually what I do, and I'll do it here as well, is I put my index page inside of its own folder, like so, and then all of the supporting stuff goes in A, use index page, or use page even, you could call it at this point. I might even do that, use page, now we'll go use index page. .ts file, and I usually do like a dstore here to define a store. I usually just call it the name of the file. You can do whatever you want there. And then what I often do then is I come in here and say const p is equal to use index page. This is just like a little quirk of the way I code. You can do this however you want. If you'd rather just try and throw most of it into this file, that's fine. It's just kind of like, it makes it really easy for me to move things into a different file. And I just find coding that way a bit more pleasant. And then I can do stuff like this. I'll do Control-Alt-Click and then put that into, throw that onto the left. By the way, I used to be able to make it so I could Control-Click something. And rather than having this peek thing, which I hate and never use, it would take me straight into the file. I don't know how to do that anymore. Something happened in VS Code. So if anybody knows how to do that, let me know in the comments. Because I want to be able to control, at the moment I have to Control-Click and then hold Control-Alt and then double-click and then like get out of it. Just like some weirdness around that. Or maybe I can Control-Alt-Click that. No, it doesn't work. Anyway, I'm sure that there's a simple way to do it. Maybe if I did it on the file. Yeah, but I don't want to do it on the file. I want to be able to do it right there. Okay, so anywho, we got that set up. Let's have a look what else we've got here. That's right, adding Vue DevTools because I love using it. So pnpm, or I can just use pp, add -d. And some of you might not be able to see that, so we'll clear that. Vite plugin Vue DevTools. And honestly, the main reason I use Vue DevTools, in fact, probably the only reason I use Vue DevTools, is to be able to Control-Click into files because I find that so ridiculously intuitive to be able to do that. So now we should be able to, I can't remember how to do this. No, I think I do actually. Vite plugins, here we go. I think we just come in here and then just whack in the name of it like this. Yeah, that's it. I believe so, at least. Now, I believe we lost our server for some reason, so let's run pdev to get that running again. And I do not like it opening up the browser straight away. So, where is it? It's called, yeah, here we go. Instead of browser open true, I'm going to set that equal to false. Let's jump into our routes file. We put this into a directory. So now it has to be pages/indexpage/indexpage. There we go. Now, I don't like that this shows up straight away. For now, I guess it's kind of cool because I can like get some of these rules enforced. So what I might actually do is I'll say p-lint --fix. So what that does is it runs our linter here, ESLint, and then it just runs through all of our linting files. And if you add --fix, it's going to try and fix everything up as it goes. All right, so it looks like I might have found one thing that it couldn't fix. Now we run pdev, refresh the page, give it a hot second, and it might come up with errors again. Yep, there we go. So what do we got here? Unused vars. That's really difficult to work with when you're doing tutorial videos. So I'm going to disable that rule by jumping into our ESLint config, rules. I think I can throw it in here. And we'll set that equal to off. I think I actually need to restart the dev server whenever you change the ESLint rules. So let's just do that. Luckily with Vite, it's so ridiculously fast, it doesn't matter. And there we go. We don't have any linting errors anymore. Now, there is one more thing I need to do, which is to set initial is open to false, I believe is what it is. And I think that's done. Oh, man, I can't remember how to do that. Okay, so let's look this up. Initial is open. Here we go. This is my dodgy way of finding things. Here we go. So for overlay, initial is open is equal to false. For some reason, I think it works both ways, but with Quasar, they want you to use the plugin this way, where you have the name of the plugin and then the config there. And the only problem with that is that I lose my typing. So I'm sure there's a good reason for this, but I don't know. And by the way, I don't have my chat doc up, so let's go ahead and get that up. Chat, just in case. I haven't done a live stream in a while, so I don't expect to get a lot of chat today, but just in case it happens, there we go. I've got that showing up on my bottom screen now. Okay. So it's always fun to set up a new project for the first time when you haven't done it in a while. Work through these little quirks and remember how to do these things. So the first thing I think I want to make config driven before I start doing any more kind of advanced stuff, and I should give you an idea of what we're going to be doing, by the way. So we're going to be building a config-driven application, which means that essentially you end up with a massive JSON file, and massive in quotations because it won't actually be that big, but a JSON file that describes everything that displays in your application. So not just displays, there are some other things as well, but it essentially, a lot of what you see in your app and how it's used for that specific user gets driven by one big JSON file, which I'm calling here the config file. So all the menu items that show up, that will be driven by config. So if the user doesn't have, for example, forum in their config file, then that menu item wouldn't show up. The title up here, you could even drive that by config. Maybe you've got a logo up the top here. You would drive the image of that logo in config, which means that your app can be white labeled. Language, so if it notices that your English is your language, then the English config gets merged into your configuration. All sorts of stuff like that. And then we can go even deeper and say, for example, all of the fields for the let's just say you got posts, all of the fields like the title for a post also have their own config. So when you're inputting a title, what's the icon for that? What's the label for that? What's the hint for that input if you want to have a hint? Do you want to have a prefix at the start of the input or a postfix at the end of the input? All of that stuff can be controlled by config. And if you do this in config, then it means that you've got a very, very flexible app. And it takes more effort up front, but it takes less effort in the future. And it also means that you can empower other people on your team to be able, and that includes non-technical people, to be able to have more control over the application. So it's really difficult to explain how many cool things you can do with configuration. That's kind of why I wanted to start building and playing around with these ideas first. Okay, so config-driven apps, what are we going to do first? Yeah, so I might actually just kind of demo what I'm talking about here. We'll jump into the main layout. And let me just show you again why I like Vue DevTools. Oh, Z might be my current default editor. Let's see if this works. You can just kind of click on something and it opens up in your editor straight away. No, it is set to VS Code. I've been playing around with Z, but oh, that's cool. That's new. Don't mind that. Yeah, I've been playing around with Z because it's much faster, and I like the editor more. It's got really nice AI options built into it if you want to use agents and stuff like that. However, there's a lot of stuff that it still can't quite do that VS Code can do, so I haven't been using it. Okay. So let's push on here. rather than having this concept of essential links, I'm going to lay things out a little bit better, a little bit more like how I like doing it. So I don't even like having a components directory. I don't know, that might actually make sense in this app model. I don't want any of that. And now we'll jump into our layout, and I like to put things in its own folder, main layout. And then I'll create a new file here called use main layout.ts, dstore, got a snippet for that. And then we'll jump in here. Now we can just start culling a bunch of stuff to sort of bring this back to something that I want. Essential links, that's the component that we got rid of before. And here's our list here. And I might leave that part. This is one thing that we'll be able to control with configuration, so that'll be a really good demo showing you how to do that. Again, the Quasar app, I'm going to get rid of the version. I'm not sure that's really necessary. And another thing we'll probably end up doing is having a drop-down menu here, which is also driven by configuration. Cool. All right, let's do a refresh. Okay, so I have to start the server again. Sometimes when you're doing a lot of big fundamental changes, this happens. All right. So now in our routes file, we're going to make sure we're pointing to the right spot. Cool. All right, so what I might do is make it really simple to begin with and create a base config file. And maybe we'll do that. I'm just going to put it in the root of our source directory for now. And I'll call this base config.ts. And now we can say here export const base config. I think that's how I'll do it. And then we might also add some types for this as well. So maybe I will actually create a folder here called config. Let's save that for now. And we'll put that in there. And it just means that we can keep the types in that folder as well. I reckon for now, though, we can actually just put it at the top. Export an interface called base config. And now the first thing we want to do, I reckon, is just see if we can target this essential links section. So we'll start really, really simple for now. And we'll call this, how about we nest this in our main layout? Yeah, so let's do this. Let's say, rather than creating another interface, we'll keep it simple for now. How about we say main menu is what we'll call this. So maybe left menu, main draw menu. Yeah, I'm going to call this, I'll call it main menu. I think that'll do. And then we can set like the title to that, which is going to be a string. And now we come in here, and I like to try and make everything optional when I'm doing config, just because it becomes a nightmare to handle types. Because all these configs get merged together at the end. Often you'll have configs that are almost completely blank, but they override one thing. And therefore, I'm going to make everything optional by default. And then the only trade-off there is that you kind of need to code things so that there can be nothing. But that's really not that big a deal, because in fact, it's probably a good idea because it means that you can set defaults as you go. All right, so let's come in here and we'll say, this is our base config. And we're going to have a main menu, and the title is going to be equal to, let's just call it config app. Okay, and now, should I go one step further and do the merging? No, I won't do the merging yet. So next, let's make it so that that now uses that text. And just because I like doing this, let's go ahead and use View Dev Tools to show that up. And instead of essential links, what we can do now is import our config. So we can say here, I can probably do an auto import. Let's say base config dot main menu. And I'm surprised I didn't do the question mark dot there. I guess that's always going to exist. So then we could say here, main menu, I don't know, something like that. And have we lost our server again? What am I doing wrong here? Title config app. Oh, okay, main menu dot title. All right, so let's come back into our main layout. God, that's embarrassing. Yeah, of course, because it'll spit anything out here. Can I go a new line, or is Prettier going to fix that up for me? No, okay, let me do that. So we'll go main menu dot title. My bad. Okay, and then we get the question mark dot there. That makes a lot more sense. And there we go. So this is now coming from our configuration. So this is where it kind of gets a little bit interesting though. We got our base config, but let's just imagine we're pulling some data from the back end that is brand related. So maybe we're building an app that people can white label so they can have their own branding in their application. And for that, how about we actually target this section here? So what we could do is make this the brand of our app. So let's just imagine we have two brands and we might call one of them, you know what, I'll decide the name of it in a second. What we can do here is create now a new composable called useconfig.ts. And I'm going to install a new library. I think it's called deep merge. So let's try deep merge -ts, I believe is what it is. There's a few of these, so I need to make sure I'm getting the right one. The one that actually, yeah, I think that's it. That picture rings a bell to me. And this allows you to very easily recursively merge JSON files or JavaScript objects, which in our case is mostly just going to be JSON. So let's go ahead and add that. P-add deep merge TS. And let's get this composable going now. And let's just imagine we have a user object here, const user. Later on, we're going to make this a bit more realistic. And that user comes with some configuration. And we might even do some typing up here. So we can say interface user. And that user has got some config, which is equal to, instead of calling this base config, let's create a new file here now called, we might call this app config. Just because the word config is so broadly used, I try to make it a bit more specific. Export app config, and that is an interface. Export, oh my gosh, my brain's exploding here. Interface app config, there we go. And let's yank this out of here and put it into that file. That was like the clumsiest refactor in the history of refactors, I think. Okay, so now we can call this app config, and it's going to be more easy to use this in multiple places. Oh, look at that. See what I mean by being specific? That's actually being used by Vue. So I accidentally imported the wrong one. I might even, let's reconsider this. Let's call this, I don't know, what else would you call it? Okay, we'll leave it as app config for now. It's not important enough. Now, for use config, I'm going to create something here called merged config. I tend to do this on the back end just because it's a little bit, tends to be more efficient. So I'll do this config merging on the back end, but for the sake of doing all these examples here, we're actually going to merge it all on the front end. So now for our user that we're creating, that user can have a app config. And now we can say for this user, that config, in fact, rather than doing a user, how about we call it a brand instead? Because that's a little bit more specific to our example. Yeah, it's a better idea. So now we can come in here and type this brand and say, for that brand, the main menu's title should be equal to, I don't know, Lugu config. Lugu is what my nephews and nieces call me. It's a nickname that I gave myself. Oh, I'm a strange person. So now what we can do is merge the brand config with our base config. So if we come in here, we can say return deep merge, I believe is what it's called. I don't know how they like us to import it. This is what I often do when I don't know how things are imported. I'll import like this, deep merge TS, and then I'll do a control space just to see what we've got available to us. Okay, so it looks like the way they're doing it, if I control click here, is by using an export default. I'm just going to take a guess and think that that's probably what it is. So we'll just say deep merge like that. And if I do a deep merge dot, what do we get here? What have I done wrong? I've got a syntax error, don't I? I don't see it. Const. Maybe it's up here. Oh. Yep. It certainly would be up there. Okay, deep merge dot. And then what do we get here? Okay, I might have to restart view dev tools. Can hear my computer chugging away, which tells me that maybe there's something running. I'm going to do this on my bottom screen in case there's something sensitive. I doubt it, but you never know. So we're on htop just to have a look at what's eating my CPU. Okay, nothing that I can see. It might actually might even be OBS Studio. Okay, let's see what we get now. Still nothing. Huh. All right, that's weird. Let's see how deep merge is used. Yeah, all right, it is imported that way. My bad. And I believe the way you use it is pretty much like object.assign. So we can just say deep merge and then give it everything that we need. All right, so there we go. And the first thing is the one that's going to be overridden. So it's like object.assign, meaning we would want our base config, which is kind of like, you can think of it as our starting point, as the first one. And then we can say here brand.config. So you can imagine brand is coming from a backend. So we pull in our brand, which has its config from the backend. And now that's going to be dynamic for us. So we've got our merge version of our config. We might even just call it merge config there. But in the context of using this config, this composable, if you can imagine here, config is equal to use config. What you probably want to do is say config.merged, because if I said here merged config, that's a little bit verbose. We already know it's config related. So what I might actually do is call this merged instead. Too much information, but I just wanted to give you an idea of why I was changing the name of that, because I think the API is going to look nicer. Okay, so let's jump back into our index page. Back into our index page. No, we'll jump into our main layout, and now we want this part to be dynamic. So what I might do, let's make a bit more space here. We should have done that a while ago. Let's do a split here, and we'll jump into our use config file. I might even do another split here, and we have the main menu. Maybe we have another one here called app title, something like that. So we'll make that a string, and then for the base config, so I'm going to open up here our base config. Yeah, we can call this, maybe we can even make that config app. So config app. And the main menu, it would make more sense to just call this a main menu, I think. And then for our brand one, we'll come in here and we'll make this, we might even just leave that. Yeah, that'll probably give you a better idea of how all of this works. So we'll add here the app title and we'll set it to Lugu config. All right, so let's go through what's happening here. We have our base config. So the app title, our configs, the app title is equal to config app. And so that's up here, that'll be called config app. And our main menu title is called main menu. So that's what ends up here, main menu. Then this config gets merged in. So under merge, you can see we have base config, and then we merge into that the brand config. So what happens here is app title gets overridden by the brand config, which is Lugu config. And let's call it Lugu app, because now I'm saying the word config too many times. So hopefully that makes sense. If there is no branding applied, the app title will be boring app. But once we merge in the config for our branding, it then ends up saying Lugu app. All right, so let's get this into action. Over here, we'll come up and we'll say const config is equal to use config. So we're going to start using this composable all over our app. And now we can come down here and say the title of our app is equal to config dot merge to get our merged config. And now we can start surfing for what we need. App title. And if you want to be extra careful here, you can go one step further and maybe add here like ... just to give you a hint that that hasn't been added yet. And there we go. Now it says Lugu app. And if we come down here to the main menu, I might change that to ... And maybe this can be our, the concept that we use, where we say, hey, try and figure out what the title is, but if something's wrong and you can't figure it out, then just add ... I think that's probably a good idea. So now let's imagine that we have two different brands. We have one brand, and let's call this one Lugu brand. Imagine we're getting this from the back end. And John Smith brand. Then we can say here, John Smithio Inc., something like that. Now what we'll do is, what's going on here? Cannot find name brand. Oh, because I just changed it. So now we can say if it's equal to Lugu brand, well, let's whack this in. Why aren't they going side by side? Oh, it seems to be working now. So if it's set to Lugu brand, we get Lugu app here. But if we change it to John Smith brand, then we get John Smithio Inc. How cool is that? So this might not seem that powerful yet, but this is kind of the base foundation for how all of this works. Basically, we configure the app via these config files. And, you know, this is something that you might actually be doing. You might have done something like this before at a database level. But I think what you'll start to see is by doing it this way, we get some incredible flexibility. And just to give you a taste of some of the stuff I'm going to explore in the future, in one of the apps that I'm building in production, we're now doing this concept, and we have many layers. We've got what I call the foundation layer, or there's even one above that, which is basically whatever's hard-coded into the app. So we have some stuff hard-coded into the app for our config. Then we have foundation, meaning every single person that uses this app gets that configuration. So maybe there's certain columns that we want to show in a table. Then that configuration goes into foundation. Then we have more stuff that's going to show at a brand level, okay? Because we white label the application, so we've got our own branding, but then we also allow other people to be resellers. So in that case, it might be, for example, our company. You know, we might set a title equal to our company. This is something we actually do, and then things like, you know, images / our company image dot JPEG, stuff like that. All of this stuff gets into that config. And then we do things at a organization level. So different organizations want things to look different. And a classic example of that is the default fields that they see in a table. So they just want everybody who logs into their app to, by default, not have to change the fields in the table. They just want the same fields to show up. And what we actually do is we take those, what we call them initial columns. So initial columns, for example, in a database, and we want them to only show up for people in that organization. That organization has very specific needs, and we're able to cater to their specific needs very, very easily via configuration. All right, and this might happen at all levels. So we might have some hard-coded values for columns that show up. An example of that is live data. We have a live data column, which basically shows you when a piece of data is currently being updated. Due to the nature of our app, we have transactions that are that take a while to occur, so they might occur over like 50 seconds. So our transaction table needs to have a live, whatever it's called, like a live data column or whatever we end up calling it. So that's going to be hard-coded. Then in foundation, we might also say, so I can say to the CEO, hey, you've got total control over this. You can set up foundation however you like. And he might say, every single piece of equipment in our app has to have a name. And so in the foundation configuration, we've got the equipment name. And we actually have validation in there as well, like equipment.name.rules, and that might have the required rule in it, something like that, right? And now he's got control over these validation rules. But here's the cool thing. He wanted to be able to set some validation rules himself. Now that I've implemented that, we can set this at any level. So if you want, you can say, hey, this rule for required exists there. Maybe this organization is sick of people putting in really short names for equipment. So what they can do is they can now say the equipment.name.rules, I want it to also have a min equal to 6 characters, or you got to have at least 3 characters in the equipment name. Maybe other people that doesn't matter, and they often have names that are like 1, 2, 3, and 4 for their equipment. So we don't want to apply this to all organizations, but then some organization might have this problem. We can now help them through configuration. So anyway, that gives you an idea. It goes further. We also have the concept of features. So we've got features that you can pay extra money for. So that might be some complex reports that take us a long time to build. And so we bolt that on as an extra feature that you can purchase. There's all sorts of stuff like that. We've got higher tiers of our subscription that you can get. So we can also have feature configuration. And an example of that is being able to have projects. Okay, this is a common thing in apps where if you want to organize things by projects, then you might have the project feature, or you need to get the plus plan. So then what you can do is say we've got features like, I'm just going to make up some stuff here, projects, ultra, all the random crap that you've got like that. And each of these features has got their own configuration. This makes it really, really easy to build features in an application and tie those features into something like Stripe. Because all you have to do is sync what features are associated with an org. So you got like a many relationship here. And then we can say that org has got the projects and the ultra features. Therefore, they get the projects config, which might, for example, add project to the transactions table. So that shows up in its columns. And the ultra config, which might, enable a certain part of the app, which means that you can, open menus that you couldn't otherwise open. Or another one we've actually got is the API tokens feature, so that you can generate API tokens and access our API, and we can sort of control how much you can hit the API and stuff like that. And that's another thing, how much you can hit the API could also be a thing. So you could have like API tokens ultra, I'm just making this stuff up now, which in configuration gives you more, means that you can hit the API, 50,000 times a minute rather than 20,000 times or whatever. And the cool thing about this is this configuration can exist on the front end now, and you can use it on the back end. So the back end merges all of this configuration together and gives it to the front end, but it can also merge all this configuration together and use that configuration itself. By the way, you might think, hang on, that's going to be super slow. You might be right. It could end up being quite slow as this config gets bigger and bigger, and you're pulling from your features table and your org table and your brand table, and you're trying to smush it all together to make one big configuration file. However, once you've done that, you can then cache it very easily. So you can cache that config file for every single user, because, by the way, you can then come in here and say, hey, you've got a user config, so that you can show and hide certain things for users. So you might even do this as you go. Every single time the user shows and hides a column, you might actually update their config so that when they log back into the app, no matter what device they're on, it shows up. And that gets merged into all the other config as well. So that's kind of cool. But anyway, the point of that being is you can very easily cache all of this, because you can now easily write code that says, hey, I've changed the foundation config, therefore you need to regenerate the config for everyone. And you might do that in a job. All right, and it's not going to be that big a job. You can have like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of users. It's not that hard to merge all of this config, to merge JSON. It's not a big operation, even if those JSON files are quite big. And I think you'll find that most backends can do it quite well. I'm doing it in PHP, which is not the fastest of backends. It's actually pretty fast these days, and it handles this just fine. So now you can start doing stuff like that. You can say, oh, this user has changed their config. Well, we don't have to change the config for everyone. We can now just change the config for that user, and you can do it at different levels. So you can do some smart things with caching, where you say, whenever foundation changes, you now need to merge all the way down the line up to every single user. But if you change it for an org, you only need to merge down the line from this point. And if you change a feature, you only need to merge down the line from this point. Okay, so there's like some really interesting things you can do there if you're worried about performance. I actually don't do any caching stuff, but if you want to do, you could do that and get some really incredible performance. Here's the other thing. You might think to yourself, hang on, Luke, this is going to be, what if my app gets out of control? I end up with these massive, massive config files. Well, it's all just JSON. So it's really, really easy at the end of the day to just create an API endpoint that allows the user to pick exactly what config they want. You can even do this through something like GraphQL. I wouldn't do it through GraphQL. I'd probably just end up rolling my own thing. And I haven't hit this problem yet, but I have thought about it. If you only wanted to get things, so let's just say, in fact, this is a real problem that I have. We have config for our admin app and for our mobile app. And currently, we just send all of the config together. So all the admin app, the mobile app config, that all gets sent at once. It would not be rocket science to create an endpoint that says, hey, just give me my admin app config or just give me my mobile app config. So you can very, very easily sort of build this however you like. So that you get, the cool thing about everything just being simple JSON config at the end of the day is that it's very, very easy to start working with it. Because JSON is so easy to work with. It's so easy to cache. It's so easy to merge together. It's so easy to query. So you end up with this thing that's really, really easy to work with. Okay, that's enough talking about that for now. What are we up to? So to finish up this stream, what I might do is make it so that we can have main menu items, because that's where things start to get a little bit more interesting. And then I'll do another stream where we start working with entities as well. Okay. I'm going to come into our drawer here. So we've got our queue list, and we might do everything inline for now. So I like to do an example item inside of my menu and then work from there. And I'm going to bring this out a little bit, yeah, so that shows up by default. Now let's say queue-item, queue item section, and we might start with just like a home item. Why am I not getting hot module reloading here? What's going on? That's been fixed now. I've obviously done something wrong along the line here. Oh, that doesn't matter. I can just refresh things for now. I don't want to waste time figuring that out. Whilst you're watching, so we've got a home item, and we also want that to take us somewhere. I like to do that using named routes. So what we might do, yeah, let's just go ahead and build the page. It's not going to take that long. New folder in there called home page, a new file in there called homepage.view, template, queue page is how you do a page with Quasar. And I might just add some padding into that, and we'll say here, home page, exclamation mark. And now we'll jump into our routes here, and I like my routes to kind of open up like this. I don't like them to be single lined. I like lots of space when I code. And now we'll come in here and we'll just copy paste that. This will be home page. And how about we make that /home, and the name of that will be equal to home. And the reason I like to have names is so that I can easily change the name at a later date. So I commit to myself to always use names when I'm navigating. And then if I need to change the path for whatever reason, I can without breaking the rest of my app. So that's the cool thing about named routes. And it also means you can have something that reads a little bit nicer. So if you got something like, this is the home page, terrible example, you'd never actually do that. But it means you can still have a name of home, and it just means your code is a little bit cleaner. You don't have to write all of this, especially if it's nested. Okay, home. So now what we can do is come back here into our main layout, and then I'll come in here and say 2 is equal to home. Man, that is so frustrating. What is going on here? It doesn't usually break like this, so there's something going on. And there we go. I can click on there and it takes me to home. All right, we might give it an icon. Let's just find some ways to make this a little bit fancier. It'll make our job a bit more fun. So how about we say side here, And we use a Q-icon there. And the name of that icon, that's right, we'll hard code it for now. So let's say name is equal to home. I think that's the name of an icon. Yeah, there we go. So we got this home icon now. What else can we do? Let's make it so that you can hover over this as well. So Q-tooltip, and we'll just say go to the home page. Just to demo that we can do that. Oh my God. It's really, once you're used to hot module reloading, it's really frustrating when you don't have it. This is running Vite. I didn't accidentally use Webpack, did I? How can I tell? I think in no modules you get a .vite file or dot. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, it's definitely running Vite. That is so strange. Doesn't matter. Okay, so we got a tooltip that shows up as well. What else? Maybe you could add a color in. I don't think I would do something like that, so let's just leave it at that now. So the reason I like to do it hard-coded first is because it gives me a good idea of what I want it to look like. And now we can jump into use config. Let's jump into our app config. And I'm going to set up, to begin with, interface, a separate interface for this. And we'll call this menu. We'll call it a main menu item to respect how we've written it here. Okay, so let's go from the top down. First of all, we've got a 2. I like to just hover this and figure out what the type is. Oh man, I can never remember what this is. It's so difficult to remember the types for view router in my experience. There's probably a good reason for that. Router. It's like raw route link raw maybe route link. Okay, let's do this from view router. And let's try putting in the word raw, because I'm sure it's got, here we go. Route record, route location raw, maybe? Oh, God, it's embarrassing I don't remember this. Okay, let's go with that for now. We'll see how it ends up. So we need to know where to go. We want a tooltip as well. Tooltip, and that's going to be a string. Can I get rid of that, or is it going to put them back in? Oh, okay, that's fine. Change how I like it later on. We got an icon as well. So let's say icon, and that's going to be equal to a string. And then we've got the label here. That's what I would call that, a label. So label, and that will be equal to a string. And then let's also add a sub-label just to make things interesting. So we'll say Q item label. Can I do it like this and say times 2? Thank you, Emmet. And then we could say first, and then second, maybe something like that. New line, please. Yeah, and then I think you can call this like a caption just to kind of make it look like it's secondary. Can I go back? Let's see. It doesn't look like a caption. Oh, because I got to refresh. Oh, man. I'm really missing hot module reloading. All right, that looks good enough. So we've also got a label, and maybe we'll call that a caption or sub-label. Yeah, sub-label I think is what I would prefer there. String. What else have we got here, actually? Caption, header, lines, overline. Yeah, caption's probably fine. I'm curious. If I open up here, does it think I'm in production mode? Sorry, guys. I just really want to figure out what's going on here. It's Quasar dev. That's how I always do it. Oh, that was a bad example of something to change. Is it like not connecting to the server? It looks like I'm connected to the Vite server. Oh man, how frustrating. Oh well. Moving on. So we got a sub-label, and that's just about everything now. So now we've made it possible to have a main menu item. Well, actually, we haven't yet. We want to come in here and say main menu, and then we might call this items. Yeah, that'll do. And then this can just be an array of main menu items. Actually, I don't like to use arrays here. I prefer to use objects. And the reason I like to use objects is because they're a little bit easier to work with. This might actually be an exception to the rule. No, maybe not. So the good thing about objects is they're easier to merge together as well. So if I had an array and I merged two menu items together, then essentially you would end up with two versions of the same menu item. But if you do things using objects, then those things get merged. Hopefully that makes sense. Basically, if you've got, for example, 1, 2 here, and then you merge into that, the number 2, you end up with 1, 2, 2. So that's how arrays work when you merge things usually. So they're going to see that you want to merge in a 2, it basically gives you 2 of the same thing. But if you do it like this, 1, and then an object, 2, and then an object, then when you merge in 2, and by the way, this should be an object. When I merge in 2, what I then end up with is 1, 2, but then all the stuff in here, for example, stuff, gets merged into 2, right? And then if you've got 2 here and it's got change me, and you merge this in with this, then you end up with the one that got, you end up with 2 having the text change me in there. So hopefully that makes sense. That's why I like to use objects rather than arrays in this case, because they work much, much better with merging. The trade-off is ordering of things. And so often, kind of sucks that you have to do this, but often you need to have, for example, a position. That's what I like to call it. You can call it order, whatever you like, which is a number. And I usually like to make that in multiples of 100. You could do multiples of 10 if you think that's overkill, but you could say position 100, position 200, position 300, etc. And then you order it by the position. And the reason I do it in multiples of 100 is it's easier later on to then change the position. All right, so if you want like a drag and drop tool, actually, I don't know. I don't even know if that's true, actually. I have to question myself on that, because if you had a drag and drop tool, you could just overwrite the config and rewrite the position of everything. Yeah, I don't know. But when you're entering it in JSON, it's easier when it's a larger number, because you can easily make changes without having to change every single value again. So anyway, they're just a few things to think about. We can come in here, and I think the way I would do this is... Oh, I can never remember the syntax for this. Something like that. Is that right? Yeah, something like that. Okay, so let's have a go at writing this config now. I might do this in the base config. Yep. And now we can come in here and then add in some items for our main menu. And let's add our first item, and I'm going to call this home. And now we get all of our typing showing up there. So let's have an icon for that, which will be equal to home. Label, home with a capital H, position, and I'm actually going to leave that. You don't have to add it in if you don't want to. Sublabel, maybe something like home page. Tooltip, go to the home page. Now this is the part I want to know if it's going to work correctly. Oh yeah, it looks like that I did type that correctly. So I think route location raw is what it is. All right, and we'll set that equal to home. So now we should be able to use all of this information here in our config to essentially recreate this part here. All right, so we'll come up here and we will say config dot, oh, we're not even using the merged config here. Config merged main title. By the way, I think I like this. At first it kind of annoyed me, but I think I kind of like how they add this different styling here. It's interesting. All right, so merged dot main menu dot items And of course, this is now going to have to be a for loop. Now, for now, I'm going to ignore the position aspect of it, but this is the point where you would do some ordering, and you would actually use those positions. So I might do v4, let's say item in object.entries. I want to do the simplest example to begin with. And again, this is one of the reasons I really like having everything optional. You can just have this really safe fallback then. Whereas if I were to get rid of that, I would get a type error because this might not be an object, it might be undefined, and you can't do object.entries and undefined. And rather than doing an entry here, let's actually pluck out what we want. So we'll call this the key. And let's call this menu item. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And then we can set the key equal to the key. In fact, I can do this now. I love it when I can do this. It just makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. Then we can use that menu item. So let's go through these things one at a time. Menu item dot icon. Actually, the first one is up here. Menu item dot to. I've done that wrong. This should be the entirety of that. There we go. And by the way, you could, if you wanted to, pluck some stuff out like this. I don't like to do it that way. I prefer to have the context. I'd rather say menu item dot, because it means that as I scroll down, especially as files get bigger, I kind of appreciate having the word menu item there rather than just the word icon. I do appreciate having that extra context, but that's just it's a flavor thing. You choose whatever feels right for you or whatever your team decides on. Menu item dot tooltip, and what we might do is actually add an if statement here as well. So if you don't want to have a tooltip, then if there is none, then just don't show one. So as we're doing, when you're building things in a config driven way, you want to be constantly covering yourself. So you want to be doing lots of stuff like this where you say, don't show this if it's not there, don't show that if it's not there. You want to have a lot of these if statements that protect you from accidentally creating like screwy UIs with words that say undefined and stuff like that. At least that's how I like to think of it. Let's make this a little bit nicer. I like to space things out. And let's come in here and say if we have an icon, then you can go ahead and show the menu icon. And you can even go as far as doing it here. This might be overkill at this point. I don't know. But you need to make sure we've got a label or a caption, which in this case is our sublabel. Then we can come in here and we can use our label, and then we can use our sublabel there. Okay. And there we go. Everything looks the same, but it's all coming from configuration. Go to the home page. Is that right? Yep. Home. And then we could say, for example, your home here, save it, refresh the page, and now it says your home. Maybe you want it to be different depending on the client, or, imagine you're working with a brand that is an Italian brand. Then in that case, I hope I don't get in trouble by some Italians for this. Translate home from English to Italian. I hope that's right. Then what you could do is say, if we go to our use config and we go to our brand, let's create a new one here called Italian brand. Italian brand. And then in the menu here, we could then say, okay, let's go through this. We should get nice typing. Main menu. And if it is for the home, then I'm not getting type in there. No, I should be going to items first, shouldn't I? Home, then I want to overwrite that and change the label of that equal to this Italian version. And can I put a capital in there? There we go. And now If it were the Italian brand, then it comes out in Italian. So I'm just trying to demonstrate here the power that we have. We can use this config-driven approach to do things in different languages. And as you can imagine, it's not difficult to create a view component that then edits these config files. In fact, that's what I might do to finish up the video here. Let's create a way to edit these config files. And we might even, then what we could do is save it to local storage. That would be really cool. So let's go into our home page. We might just do it there. I'm going to close everything. Home page. And how about this? Let's go to our use config. I'm going to get more code driven for a bit, so we'll make some more space there. And what I might do, okay, this would be cool. We can say const local config is equal to use, and this is so fun. You get to just keep adding them on here, and we'll use views here, view use here. So p add at view use / core. View use has a really cool composable for working with local config. Local storage. Use local storage. Look at that. I got it already. I love it when this stuff just goes so quickly. Like PNPM is probably doing some awesome caching stuff, and straight away the editor picks it up. Never used to run this fast for me, so I'm always enjoying it when I get these benefits. And now I believe the first parameter is your default. Oh no, the first parameter is your key. I like to do it. This is what I do. I take the name of the file, use config, and then I say dot, and then the name of the variable. That's just kind of a habit I've gotten into. And I believe, this is the initial value. So we'll make that an empty object by default. And now what we can do is easily just return it here like that. And now what we'll do is we'll make it so that this constantly updates as we make changes. So let's go to our home page now. And this can be our page for editing config. So I'll come down here. And we'll just start building out the form. So I might just do a Q card. No, we don't even need a card. Let's just do really simple. We'll go Q input. I'm going to make it filled. And we might even be able to edit it directly and see changes in real time. Let's do that. That would be really cool. So we'll say const config is equal to use config. And now we can map everything directly onto this local storage config here. And we just need to make sure that gets merged in. There we go. And that's computed, so that should all work fine. And so we'll start with a really simple example. Let's say vmodel is equal to config.local config app title, because I believe that's this here, app title. And because this is the last thing in the list, it's going to be the one that takes priority. All right. This is something that you need to think about when you're building config. You need to think about what takes priority. So for example, the last thing that should take priority would be the user config. So in that example I gave before, where you've got like hard coded, this is at the very bottom of the line. And at the very top of the line would be, for example, the user's configuration, or maybe you even have configuration that is on local storage, which would probably go even above user. So you need a logical progression of your config. You need to know what takes the highest priority. In this case, it's pretty obvious to me that local config takes the highest priority. And that takes us all the way down the chain. Local, into our branding, into our base config. Yeah, in fact, let's do this. Italian language instead, just to give a little, like a better example here with the John Smith branding. Because to me, it's clear that, oh man, I really hate that I can't do that. The prettier, yeah, that's okay. I'll make changes later on. Yeah, but the cool thing about this is this is something you might need to think about a little bit. What takes priority, language or branding? To me, it's pretty obvious that language would take priority, because you might have a brand that's got multiple languages. You've got to kind of think of the hierarchy when you're building apps in this way. Okay, so let's get back to the fun part. This hot module reloading is going to drive me nuts. And let's give this a label equal to app title. There we go. Change. And there we go. You can see that we can now change this config directly. And since it's in local storage, because that's all being stored in local storage, where is it? Local config. It's using use local storage here. I can refresh the page and it's still going to show up. So that's really cool. You can imagine this could be super fun for prototyping applications. So if let's go into application, storage, and we'll have a look at our local storage here. I might even just clear everything and then start from scratch just because I've been doing stuff. You can see that that gets put directly into here. Really, really cool stuff. Okay, let's play a little around with this a little bit more before we finish up. I want to be able to add new menu items. I feel like that would be cool and something that's could be slightly challenging. We might start with, well, what's the next thing in our configuration? We might go down the line. Here we go. We'll say main menu title. And we can change that to, oh, so this should actually be, yeah, app title, main menu title, and that should be main menu dot title. Now, usually vModel doesn't work though when you've got this question mark dot here. So what we'd actually have to do, I think, is initially set that to something, maybe set it to undefined. Yeah, so how about we do this? Let's say, and I often use Lodash's set for this, but let's see if we got something better than Lodash's set. I might even use ChatGPT. Oh, hang on, this isn't my normal browser. So I'm just going to bring up my browser, and I might bring it down on the bottom screen. The reason I split the browsers app is just in case I accidentally show something that I shouldn't. It's mostly just work stuff, so I doubt it would matter anyway. But let's go over here. And then we'll say, oh, what was I going to ask? Oh, yeah. I'm looking for a library that has got something like set from, oh, I might even just dictate it here. I'm looking for a JavaScript utility library that does something like set from Lodash. So Lodash has got a utility called set, and it means that I can easily set something that's deeply nested. Do you know of a library that does that? Maybe from the Just library. Okay, I thought that would go quicker than that. Just save set. Is that from the Just library? Yeah, this is the one. Yep. Okay, so let's do that. P add just save set. And how do they do it? They do it in an array. Can I do it in a, oh yeah, you can do it in a string as well. What does the for mean? Oh, that's all right. I'm sure I'll figure that out. So we can now say import set from just safe set. I think that's how you're supposed to do it. Set. Yep, and then we get all of our typings. Cool. All right, well, that's interesting. Just give me a hot second to respond to something. Okay. Where was I? Okay, so we wanted to be able to set something so deeply nested. So what I might do is say set. We'll say config here. If I do an object though, I wonder if it gives me typing. Nope, looks like it doesn't. But if we jump into that config file, this might not be the best way to do it. I got to do some more thinking on this. Well, what about an array? Does that give me typing? No, it looks like it doesn't. just going to quickly restart our view server just in case something is messed up there with my TypeScript, as it does every now and then. Okay, that would have been cool, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be able to do that. And we want to jump now into main menu dot title, and by default set that to an empty string. That's what I'm thinking here. Is that, well, even undefined actually, that's probably more what I want to do. Why am I getting an error here? Oh, okay, and that's got to do with this part here now. We can now get rid of that question mark safely because it should already be set. But it looks like it is failing. Fine. Reading title, is that right? App copying, main menu. Oh, it should be main menu items. Dot. No, we're just doing title to begin with. Main menu dot title, yeah. Okay, so, oh, I did it on config. I was meant to do it on local config. That means it's almost time to finish the stream because Lugu is getting tired. Okay, so now it's set to undefined by default, which is why it's working. The problem is I think I need to be able to do something like this. Yeah, that's basically saying, hey, TypeScript, I know that this actually does exist, so it's fine. I don't think this is the best strategy. There's probably something that we can figure out for this, but I just wanted to like get something up and running. Let me bring that file open again. So now that we've got let's go down the line now. And we want to do menu items. So maybe something like this. I will do a card. And we might call this like add menu items, or even just like menu items. And maybe we add another card section here. Add a bit of text. Okay, and then I'm thinking we have a button that adds in a new menu item. So maybe we'll just add a Q button there for label equal to add item. And we'll just use our primary color. Have a sip of my hot chocolate because it's been getting cold. It's probably already cold now. I have mint hot chocolate that has got no milk in it at all. It's just hot water and this kind of healthy-ish hot chocolate. And I like it. Kind of gets rid of that craving for chocolate, but isn't annihilating my body. Okay. This is driving me nuts. After this stream, the first thing I'm going to do is figure out why the hell I'm not getting hot module reloading. It's crazy. Can't live without it. Okay, so we want to be able to add items there, and then we'll probably get a menu that shows up. So what I'll do is I'll jump into Quasar. I just want to think of the easiest way to do this, and I'm thinking if we go to our plugins, there is a plugin for a dialog, and we're going to open up a dialog when you click on this item for adding a new item. So let's go function add item, and that's going to open up a dialog. So we'll say dialog, which we import from Quasar create, and it's going to have a title equal to add item. And let's just see what that looks like to begin with. Yep. And now we want to have an import. And how do I add an input to that? Pretty sure it's pretty simple. Like input maybe? Oh man, I can't remember how to do this. I haven't done it in so long. Quasar.dev, and then we'll say dialog, but we want the plugin dialog. Yeah, from the plugin. Input, and that one's got an import. So let's just see what it did. Script. Okay, prompt. Prompt. type equal to text, I guess. Well, that's probably optional. I don't know, I can probably just say prompt to make it. Can I just set that to true? No, I want something. I want a title, I think, for the prompt. So let's see what the typing is saying. Oh, model. So maybe you can pass through a ref there. All right. I think that should do now. Yep, add item. And then I'm guessing I can add like a label equal to item name. Yeah, okay. And that will add that object in there. So now we do a dot on OK here. We should be able to take in that payload. Let's do a console.log of it. Okay, of course, I got to refresh the page. There we go. So our payload is just the text. And now we can come in here and set the title. It's actually pretty much that same code. But main menu, items, dot, and then the name of that thing. So we can just make this template string and use the payload there. And instead of setting it to undefined, we can then set that to an empty object. Cool, and then we would just need all of those to show up. So let's just see if this works for now. So I'll call that, I've got to refresh the page. And we'll jump into application, local storage, we'll say here other, okay. And let's just check that that has in fact shown up. Here we go. Main menu, items, and other. Okay, so now that we've got that showing up, we just need it to show up in the list and then make that an editable list now. So to do that, I might just make another section, Q, card section. It's not going to be the prettiest thing, but that's fine. And maybe that section itself is in a v-for loop. v-for is equal to item in, and now we find those items. Main menu dot items, and we want to do an object dot entries on that. Okay, so now we can grab the key and then the item that it's itself, and then I can just say key like this. Oh, why isn't key working there? Oh, this should be an array. Just because we're plucking it out of an array. And there we go. So now that that's working, we can use the key to model it. So one of the other benefits of this is it's really difficult to model arrays with Vue, but it's much easier to model objects. So when I say the benefits of this, I mean one of the benefits of structuring things as objects rather than arrays. All right, so now what we can do, we might just start by trying to add the label. Yeah, let's start with that. Q import, and we'll say the label, oh no, v model the label, which will be config, local config, main menu, items, which I know exists now. And specifically, we can use the key and then say dot label. And again, I know this exists now. There's probably easier ways to do this, but let's just give that a try. All right, and we'll set the label equal to label there. It's still complaining. What's it complaining about? Oh, okay, that's also possibly undefined. Which object is possibly undefined? Just exclamation marking everything. All right, it doesn't matter. That's for another day. So we can now set that equal to label. And if we say here, test, refresh the page, that still shows up. Very cool. We can do the same thing for the icon. And we can do the same thing for 2. And we can do the same thing for the tooltip. And we can do the same thing for the sub-label. This is all the same stuff. The only one that will be a little bit different will be the position, because we want the type of that to be equal to a number. So let's refresh this. And there we go. By the way, is that already showing up? Yeah, there we go. We can see that it's already showing up there. So label of test. And let's say that we have a page called test. So we might actually quickly create that. Source, pages, new folder, test, page. I could have been more creative than that, but my mind is not feeling particularly creative right now. Q page. And we'll just say here, test page. Oh man, those red squigglies are going to drive me nuts. Just got to deal with it. And we might set that equal to something like 200. And what's an icon we have? Maybe there's a book icon. I'm sure that exists. 2, the name of that route is test. But this is actually JSON. So that's an interesting one. I'd need a way to input JSON for that. Or we actually just make that a string and enforce that the user use 2 there. Or if it's got like HTTP or HTTPS at the start, then we turn it into a link. Yeah, okay, so what we'll do, let's change this to a string. So we won't need that anymore. And we'll go into our main layout. And now, where's that to? Yeah, so now this is going to be a name that's equal to string. And then later on, we could make this more dynamic to basically say this could also be an external link if we wanted it to. And this can also have parameters that are passed to 2. So there's lots of things that you could do there. But just in the interest of keeping things simple for now, let's do that. And then we're actually going to have to jump into use config now that I think about it and have a look at our base config. Whoop. And then we should get a type error there now. Yes, and we do. That should now be home. Okay. So I think we're pretty much done. So the test page, sublabel ... something like that. That'll do. We don't need to go add item. We don't even have to do anything. It should just pop up now. And there we go. Like as we write this, it all ends up changing. So we might even go full screen here. And if oh man. We should be able to change this on the fly. Change. Yeah, there we go. So, as you can imagine, it could be really cool to build apps in this way. And imagine being able to be, sitting with a client, and as you get this concept and you grow it and you grow it and you grow it, it'll reach a point where we can do this at an entity level as well. So we can have entities where we add items that are columns within a table, or change what the initial columns are within a table, or create entire pages that can figure out an entire model that the user might want to work with. And this is how I tend to write apps now. And it took me a little while to get all this set up, but once it's set up, not only is it easy to build stuff and super fast to add new entities to the application and new pages for those entities, but it's also, I forgot the other benefit now. So it's fast, and that's the other thing. Since everything's done the same way, it tends to be a lot less prone to errors. So when you fix an error in one spot, it fixes it everywhere. And you can then just keep throwing stuff into this configuration. And especially if you focus on making sure that you're safeguarding yourself as you code. So doing things like using the question mark dot operator, which your VS Code is automatically adding in for me, and then making sure you add defaults to things of, objects like that, and adding defaults to strings. If you do a lot of that kind of stuff along the way, then yeah, it's really easy. And it also means if you were to want to onboard a new brand, you can literally just sit there with them and build out the app. So if you make sure you add forms as you go like this for your configuration, you could sit there with them and say to them, okay, what else do you want? Like one of the things we do now is we had like a little settings button up here, and then you can click on that settings button and then just start. You get a dialogue that shows up, and I think it shows up on the right it shows up on the right side here. And then you just start adding stuff in, and then in real time, the menu starts getting built out. So, and that's for everyone. You can do that for a new brand. You can do that for a new organization. You can do that for an individual user. You can do that with the CEO while you're adding a new feature in. You can say, okay, well, what do you want this menu item to look like? And he'll say, such and such. And then you open up the menu, you go, you type it all in, you go, what do you think of that? And by the way, I never even thought about this. I'm going to start doing this now. But this idea of local storage config, you could just make it so that your app merges in local storage config. And you can even start playing with stuff in production then. Because it wouldn't hurt. You're not going to break your app or change the app at all, except for that person who's using it in local storage. So we could say, for example, if you're in admin, you can click a button that opens up the configuration stuff. And then you just start adding in all your configuration to change the app however you like it. And you go to the CEO, hey, does that look good to you? I keep saying CEO here because that's just my experience because I work closely with the CEO in the company I work for. But, a product person, and you can sit there and configure things with them. And then they go, yeah, yep, that looks good. And then you can actually, put it into your code or put it in the right config wherever you need it. Then when you've actually finished building the things, you just copy the JSON and you paste it into Foundation or you paste it into an org or wherever it needs to go. So anyway, I think it's really cool building apps in this way. Hope you enjoyed this live stream. I'm just kind of playing around with these concepts because I want to build up an idea of what this course is going to be like. It's really fun to explore these ideas from scratch since I've been doing it on my own for so long. And you make mistakes along the way when you explore concepts. So it'll be really cool to correct a lot of those mistakes as I go. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this stream and I'll see you in the next one.